Hello, hello, and welcome back for another exciting episode of the Sit Down Stand Up podcast. Joining me in my mighty mug of marketing, and we are bringing you what we are hoping is, but by we, I guess I mean my mighty mug of marketing, because I don't do the royal way. That's kind of weird. Me and my mighty mug are hoping to do is bring you an episode of not unfunny stories, and we will see how well that goes. I did take a week off, in case you didn't notice. I don't think anybody noticed, really, and nobody is going to notice because I don't announce the dates, although the posting date is there. So you may notice that there was a week hiatus. And I mean, the fact of the matter is I just had a lot of important and compelling things to get done in the morning that made me push this kind of off. And once we're past the morning time, it just doesn't feel right. I don't know why. I just decided that this is a morning thing. So if it doesn't get done in the morning, it doesn't get done at all. The problem is I didn't do any of the things that I was supposed to do or the things that I was thinking about doing. Instead of this, I ended up just staying in bed, overwhelmed by the scope of my duties for the day, and ended up getting up almost in the afternoon, and getting very, very little of anything done. So not a great time, but I will say that I did get my laundry done. And that's a major accomplishment. It's a nice way of feeling like you did something, because there's a lot involved. You know, you got to go downstairs and put things in a machine and have the machine do all the work. But then you got to move to another machine that does all the work. Then you bring it up, and then you have to fold it. That's not an easy thing to do, disciplinary wise. I mean, it's not a mechanical issue. It's just it can be hard to motivate yourself, to do that. So it's like, well, they're clean, they're in a pile. What difference does it make if they're on a pile on the floor or in the closet? But I did all of that. And it dawned on me, it reminded me of just how barbaric times used to be. I don't know that we appreciate it as much as we should. Granted, I feel like the 2020s are going to be remembered not exactly fondly. I think it's going to be considered like they're going to refer to it as the modern dark age, when just things went to crap. Which, it kind of sucks, because the 2020s or the 20s in the 1900s, the 1920s were the roaring 20s. Things were going amazing. Now, I will say women's fashion, I think, took a hit. The whole like super short haircut, the ramrod like dress thing. I don't remember what the dudes were wearing, but it wasn't. In my head, for some reason, I get the 50s. I'm thinking like the fedoras and the nice, the nice suits and everything. But that was the 50s, if I recall. I mean, I wasn't born, but I haven't looked up men's fashion, but it wasn't, I don't think it was anything great. Men's fashion just kind of, it's a different, the lapels are different. The whether it's a double breasted or just a regular suit jacket, whether it's got 3 buttons, whether it's a blazer or whatever. Like, I feel like men's fashion has very little variance, but with women, it's all over the place. And I did not much care for. I'm glad I did not live through the 20s. That's the 80s. We're kind of rough. The explosive hair, just the giant hair. You see the head, and then you see it surrounded by this bush of permed or whatever giant hair and everything. I mean, and guys had the flock of seagulls, and I mean it was all big. I didn't have big hair. I was growing up I literally grew up in the 80s, and so I didn't have an awareness of the style. It wasn't until you got older, and the 90s still carried that forward. The decades bleed into each other. So it wasn't the 80s didn't start off feeling like the 80s. They started off feeling like residual 70s, and then same thing with 90s. Didn't feel like the 90s until about 93, 94, I would say, is when it seemed to have its own identity. Started phasing out a lot of the 80s stuff. Which is natural. That happens all the time. So, but you had the big hair for a while into the 90s, and then, because I remember being in middle school, 11, 12, 13 years old, and still having that big hair be a thing. Not the super huge hair. It was starting to mellow down, and eventually, I don't even remember when it finally, turn of the century at least, because that's when Matrix came out. That's actually how I remember time these days, is by what movies came out. And then like the fashion around it. So 90s, what was it, 93, I think? 91? I don't know. It was somewhere in the 90s. You had actually, you know what? I might be a little bit wrong about that, because when did Friends come out? I don't know. Last time I tried to do a impromptu internet search during this, I ended up finding some stuff and reading some stuff that I actually ended up having to cut the episode, because I'm like, I don't think YouTube is going to be okay with this particular stuff. It just kind of went down a little rabbit hole. But anyway, but think of Friends. You can think of Friends as, okay, that's when, did Jennifer Aniston do that whole thing, Courtney Cox with it, where it's it kind of does this. Like Ace Ventura, Courtney Cox, same thing. So you can think of certain times, hairstyles, and go, okay, that's kind of what the trend was, or what was setting the trend for, for women and for dudes. Like that's kind of, you had the hair with it went, like for guys, it was going down and then up. It was a crazy time. But anyway, I digress. Well, not really, because I wasn't going anywhere to begin with, so there was nowhere for me to go back to. But it's just fun to say I digress, because it makes it sound like I was really tracking on something. But I do remember what I meant to talk about, which is, overall, I think history, it's like a stock market. Overall history trends upwards. Things get, our past, we move forward, and it's always going up, but sometimes it takes a big dip. And I think the 2020s are a huge dip. And I don't think, like I said, they bleed in. I don't think it's going to be until like 2033-ish before we really start to see an emergence from what again, I think history will refer to as the Dark Ages. Hey, what a time to be alive. But, I mean, you remember, historically, you had World War I that led into the Roaring '20s, and then you had the stock market crash, and in almost a decade of just complete financial ruin for so many people, and depression and everything. And then you had a war right after that, which got us out of the depression, or, I'm not saying causality, I'm saying we got out of a depression into a war, going into a war, but it's still a freaking war. And, you got all the stuff that comes with that. And then finally in the 50s, you get a breather. Things start going well. And then you have the civil unrest in the 60s and 70s, and, a whole shift in the social paradigm. And, and what media is telling you is telling the world, or telling its people, this is what's normal, this is what's acceptable, this is what we should be doing. Backlash to perhaps, too uptight of a societal norm at one point, but then going the complete opposite direction and just blowing society way out the window. Anyway, and then we had the 80s and 90s, which on the whole, most people remember, if you lived through it, remember it with fondness. And yeah, then it got ugly again. Well, I mean, obviously you had 9/11. I this wasn't meant to be a history lesson. I'm just saying, things are always going up and down, but through it all, technology is improving, and with it comes, great power and then great responsibility, which I'm not going to get on that tangent today. I've got a actual video that I need to be doing, that I need to finish editing, that is about, it's the particular one is about Spider-Man, and that whole ridiculous, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, but you don't take full responsibility, do you, Spider-Man? No, you don't. You have selective responsibility, and it's usually the wrong way. You also have selective compassion, which is lots of superheroes have that, and it's unfortunate. But anyway, I don't want to get that, because that's not really, you can't really go unfunny with that. Or no, you can't go not unfunny with that. That's going to just be straight up. Anyway, bottom line is, always trending upward. People are like, social media ruined the world. I'm like, no, it gave people, it gave everybody a voice. And, the bottom line is, truth has been brought forward, and truth can be ugly. Truth can absolutely be ugly, but it's always good. It's always better to have the truth than not to have the truth. It's always better to understand that there are people in the world, or that there is this trend, or that people do think this, or this is happening, rather than just live in blissful ignorance and be like, oh no, everything is awesome. Because most of us, before social media, we knew, in theory, there were bad people out there. We'd see like Cops or some of these shows where it's like, okay, here's somebody doing something bad. The newspaper would run a story, but like people kind of started getting in their heads that if it wasn't in the paper or wasn't on TV, it didn't happen. So it's like, no, things were great before social media. No, they just weren't always reported on, as we know now, with the highly selective bias that we have in our media, that even now things happen. You might have to look at the local paper. The difference between local news, it's not that inherently something becomes big news because it has to be. It becomes big news because big news papers and national TV runs with it. If they don't run with it, if it goes across their desk and they say, oh, this happened, they go, I'm not jiving with that right now. We'll just leave that alone. Then it doesn't become national news, and unless you live in that market, you don't hear about it. So I think that's maybe the biggest downside is social media has given people, where it has raised awareness to the point where it's cheap now. If somebody says they're doing something to raise awareness, you're kind of lazy in it. You kind of got the laziest motive out there, because really there is a crap ton of awareness about many things. Well, I should say this. The people that do things typically that raise awareness, they're raising awareness for something that definitely already has a lot of awareness. They're just kind of pushing it a little bit more in your face, like, you don't care about this enough. I was like, well, I think I do. It's down there. But anyway, but at the same time, there is this bizarre thing where people assume now, because there is so much information, that if they don't hear about it on some form of social media, it doesn't come across their eyes somehow in their feed, which, can we just say how obnoxious that word is to use? My feed. You know what that connotes? It's like having a feed bag strapped to your front of your face, which is not far off, really, because that's where most of our phone and our technology is right in front of our face. It literally is a feed. Well, not literally. It is a metaphorical feed bag. They are strapping you, or they've strapped a feed bag to your face and say, oh, here's your feed. Here's what you need to consume. Here's what you need to ingest. And granted, they phrase it as though this is what you want to. And to be fair, the algorithm does. It pumps out. It frustrates me to no end on YouTube that if I search for one video, like let's just say I want to find one particular video about something or anything, you do that once, and the next time you do a search, or just you go to your home, it's like everything is now about that topic. It's like, I don't want everything. I just wanted to see a thing. If I want to see it again, I'll type it into the search again. Otherwise, just give me kind of the general stuff that I always see. Now, I do love the fact that you can say, I'm not interested in this video, or don't show me, I don't want to see this channel anymore, because it's just, okay, the channel itself is not giving me something that I want to see, so just don't show me anything from that. But then it'll put stuff on your feed that is stuff that you've actually watched and you like, but it just keeps bringing it back up. And you're like, okay, I want to tell you that I'm not interested, but not because I'm not interested in the content. If you noticed, YouTube, I've watched it. I just have already watched it. So I'm no longer interested in it, but I'm interested in more like that in the future. It's a mess. It's really a mess. But so simultaneously, we have the issue of rampant awareness, not for everything, but enough where I would say when people say things are being done for awareness, most of the time it's like, no, there's plenty of awareness. You want to make it more aware, or you want to raise to the stink. They just don't want to say I'm adding to the stink, or I'm adding to the data pile. I'm just piling it on. It's no, I have to raise awareness. At the same time, there's the misconception that if it's not on social media, it's not happening. But people had that back before social media. People thought that if it wasn't on the TV, then it didn't happen, or it's not important. So anyway, and I say that in a general sense. Maybe you weren't one of those people, but I just know that was kind of the overall perception, especially when you were younger. Me in my younger days, when I wasn't really paying attention to a lot of stuff that was on TV. I'm caring more about what I'm doing with I had a lot going on back then. I had a Lego submarine I was building. It was, of course, I mismatched Lego, so it's yellow, red, and blue. It's supposed to be a World War II submarine, but that's the color scheme I got, because those are the colors I had the most of, and a few black and then a few white, but mostly yellow, blue, and red. Primary colors, very great, not great for a submarine, but it was World War II, so it's kind of like had that bow shaped. It was almost like, they were called U-boat. Well, the Germans were called U-boats. The Germans called them U-boats, but they essentially looked like boats, but like a smaller, like a conning tower instead of a giant, combat array, and didn't have a lot of weaponry. It had a few guns, but nothing big. Anyway, I was trying to model it after that, and of course the problem was I only had the propeller I had was like this big. It was like, that was the whole propeller. It was like a little it had a little brick and a little propeller. So to scale, like I kind of would have had to build it around the size of the propeller to make it look ridiculous, not look ridiculous. But I didn't want to make it this big. I guess is about how that. Yeah, maybe I could do it a little bigger than that. Actually, no, that isn't the size. No, that could be. Anyway, bottom line is the propeller looks ridiculous because it was tiny compared to the massive submarine I was building. But the problem was I could not get it to do anything I wanted to do. I could not get it to. Would not submerge. Like Legos don't naturally just sink unless it's a solid brick of Lego. But of course, I had the conning tower was hollow. There was some different stuff, so it wouldn't sink, but it also wouldn't float. So it would capsize, but it would just sit there. I was like, well, if you capsize and roll over and then sink, okay, at least it's a submarine in some degree. Like technically it's a submarine. It just is involuntary and it's not coming back to the surface anytime soon. But I could not get it to, of all the tests I did in the bathtub, I could not get it to be right side up. And so, I'm workshopping this. I'm trying to figure out how to make either this Lego construction float, okay, it's not going to sink unless I push it down into the water, but at least it's floating, or to make it sink. I couldn't do it, but so I'm working on that. I'm working on the me versus me monopoly and setting up a credit system and all that kind of stuff. So I had a lot on my plate back in those days. I'm not thinking about what the heck the news is saying and doing. And that really hasn't changed. I still don't really care what the news is saying, but that's a whole other topic. The bottom line is, I don't think social media really, the only downside I think to social media is there is so much on there now that it really makes it very deceptive, that if it's not on social media or if it's presented in a certain way on social media, that is the truth is it either didn't happen or, that's the way it happened, when there is no mitigating factor. Now, there isn't for the news either. In theory, there should be, or there is, but we know from whatever. Anyway, the point being, I think I've said that many times now, so it's really hard to, the point being, things are getting better over time, gradually. Now, technology introduces good and bad things, but, well, no, that's just the truth. The technology, not all technology. I mean, like the cassette tape. I don't know that there was anything, a big downside, social downside to a cassette tape, I guess, other than, well, no, because that was like the first time, because you had 8-tracks before then. I was going to say that was the first time that you could actually play music in your car that you wanted to play. You didn't have to listen to the radio. But no, you had 8-tracks before that. I never had one. I've never seen one, never laid eyes on one, never touched one, but I know they existed. But I did have a cassette player in my car, or my parents' car had one, and then you had the little adapters you could plug it in, and you could actually play CDs later on. But then until they had the anti-skip stuff, that became a little bit of a problem. But things go well overall. But there are there are things now that we have that are infinitely more convenient and better than the things used to be. And one of the big ones, I think, is obviously penicillin, amoxicillin, the antibiotics. Like, can you imagine having an ear infection for like 3 months because it just won't go away? You get on an antibiotic regimen, it lasts five days usually, and whatever you had, as long as it was a bacterial infection or some kind of infection, wasn't a virus, you would go away and be done. Now, viruses, obviously, they've been screwing humanity for a long time. I remember even as a kid, I liked to hear that it was a bacterial infection because that meant I got the pink medicine. I got the amoxicillin, and I liked the taste of it. I really did. It was kind of like Pepto-Bismol, but not as chalky. And yeah, it had a sweet flavor. They called it cherry, I think, but it really did not resemble cherry or strawberry. It was his own thing, really. It's like bubble gum, but not really bubble gum either. I don't know. It was an interesting flavor, but I liked it. And also it meant that I was going to get better in a few days. Like, that was just kind of the way things went. Viruses, you hear about that, and you're like, oh gosh, this just means I'm going to have to suck it up for however long. And it always felt like forever. Still kind of does. But we've made a lot of technological advances. And one of the biggest ones for me, is scented laundry. So it's one thing to do your laundry, wash your clothes so that they don't stink or they don't get rigid or whatever really bad things that happen when you let your clothes get like dirty and don't wash them. But there was no upside. It was just, okay, it's not smelly, it's not dirty, it's not nasty. But it's like, but it didn't make it special. It just meant it wasn't bad. So it was like the carrot and the stick. It was like you got the stick, which is your clothes don't stink. You don't stink. Well, unless you didn't wash yourself. But there wasn't like really an upside. But then we have scented detergent. And so you can do your laundry and you lay down and your blanket smells fresh. Your robe smells fresh. You smell fresh. You feel fresh. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And yeah, that I don't know what life was like, or how before that, like how people survived without having the ability. Now, a lot of people don't like scented detergent. Well, some people are allergic to it. That I can, if you're allergic, you get a pass. Some people don't like it. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? How can you not like scented? How can you not like the discernible smell that comes from cleanliness? Because, they're married together. Like you washed it, so it is clean. And now it actually has a smell that also connotes cleanness. Even if the smell is added, it's saying, hey, your actual laundry is truly and well clean. And now you can, and now here's a smell to accompany that to make you appreciate how clean it is. Because, I don't know how they did that before then, because you had like nose deaf is a thing. For people who don't know, nose deaf is when you're around a smell for an extended period of time, you can no longer smell it. It just kind of blends in, which is why I personally have a rotation of 3 different deodorants. Because, well, first of all, my gosh, those things are expensive. So I think it gives them a little longevity because you're not using the same one over and over. It's like every 3 days you use one. But because if you don't, you can't smell it. I like the scent of deodorant. I don't do unscented. I like smells. I like smells. Smells are important. And so, but I know if I wear the same deodorant for like a week, I stop being able to smell it. I don't smell that my armpits are fresh. I know they are in my mind, but I don't get to enjoy it. Maybe other people do. In fact, a lot of people do. Like, oh man, what cologne are you wearing? I've always worn Old Spice for time immemorial. I mean, back in the day, there was Speed Stick. I think I don't even know if that exists anymore, but I want to say college-ish time. You know, when you're developing your habits, I was doing Old Spice, and I've just been doing it ever since. But so people will compliment me and ask, you know, what cologne I'm wearing, whatever. I'm like, oh, it's not cologne, it's my deodorant. And it feels good because they're like, oh, well, you smell great. I'm like, cool. I'm Capitan. I'm Coral Reef, whatever. I mean, let's face it, the scents are not exactly like, you know, cologne. Cologne usually sounds fragrant. It sounds sophisticated. Deodorant, not so much. But that's the truth. That's where the beautiful scent is coming from. My point being that it is a great, it's great to be able to smell things. But if you don't change them, if you use the same deodorant, you stop being able to appreciate your own smell. And so I have a rotation. Maybe it sounds like I'm overdoing it. If I travel, I don't bring it. Like if I'm going on vacation for a week, which I don't remember the last time that happened. But you know, if I'm going anywhere for even 2 or 3 days, I'll only bring one stick of deodorant. I'm not bringing the entourage. But you know, when I'm at home, I like to have the 3 scent cycle is what I call it just now. But because you can become nose deaf. That's my point. So I had a friend, they had a dog that would pee all the time in the house. So the house kind of smelled like pee. And when you first come in, it's like, oh my gosh. And it's like that for the first 3 days. But if you go over there kind of with any regularity, which I did because it was one of my best friends at the time lived there. My sister's best friend at the time lived there. And my mother's best friend at the time lived there. So we always were over there for one reason or another. Or not always, but a lot of times over there. Or they were over at our house. But we'd go over there. And eventually we got nose deaf to it. Which is kind of, it's nice when it happens, you know, when you're there because you're not just smelling like dog pee. But you also know that it's still there and you're still smelling it. You're just not aware that you're smelling it because you got used to it. Same thing work. I've worked at a lot of jobs where the smell either in the actual work environment isn't all that great, or just in certain places. Like I'm trying to remember. I've worked in several warehouses. One of them, like the warehouse itself didn't smell bad, but when you got back to a certain area, I don't know, it was like whatever it was. It never smelled like poop or foul or anything like that. It just didn't smell great. But if you went back there enough, eventually, you know, it just smelled like dust. It was just a kind of dusty smell. Anyway, yeah. So I just think one of the major advances that we had was scented soap, scented deodorant, scented washing. Like, so it's not just like I would be less inclined to do the laundry without the scent. You know, I look forward to everything being a little softer, you know, especially like the bedding and stuff, bedding being softer and having a pleasant smell to it, because it doesn't ever stink. Like I don't like wear clothes over and over again. I change the sheets with frequency. So it's not like it was dirty, so it didn't stink. And even if it did, I would have been nose deaf because I'm around it all the time. It's like you don't know what your room smells like unless you go away for a couple days. Just give it 2 or 3 days, and you come back, and you're like, oh yeah, my room kind of smells like this and this. That's interesting. Or you come back, and, oh my gosh, what I must have left the trash in the trash can or something because my room smells hideous. But you wouldn't know unless you stepped out. So nose deaf is that I'm trying to bring awareness. You see, awareness to the nose deafness, which I don't think enough people talk about it these days. But I'm talking about it because it's very important. And yes, very important. And so is scented. So I spent most of today trying to talk about scented detergent, but went all over the place. But that's okay, because that's what these episodes do. I went back and I listened to the last one I did, where I scrubbed through it, just like, okay, what was I talking about the last time? And I have no idea. I still don't know. I think I was, at some point I was talking about moving to a new area, going to a different school. I don't know. For the life of me, I can't figure it out. So I was like, well, obviously there's no follow up to that. I just talk about whatever. So that's where I'm at. But yeah, the social media is, obviously we just have to adapt to it. We have adapted to a degree to it. I feel like we're still adapting, because here's the thing. Technology can develop quickly, but how we use it, how we look at it, still needs to settle. So we're just now, I feel like, well, maybe it's been for a few years. Even though Twitter and the like has been around for a while, we're still settling into where it fits into the world. Like, how long did it take for the after the printing press? Did it take for books and magazines and newspapers and all those things to start settling in, and people figuring out what they had to offer, what their limitations were, what the downsides were? Obviously you'd say, well, there's no downside, but there is, because newspapers, again, I mean, if I were to publish a newspaper or have my own news station, it's going to be very different. You're going to see very different content than you would see otherwise. There's no all powerful overarching thing that says, if you do media, you will cover these topics and these things. Now, it's a business. It is a business. It's not a public service. It is a business. And so it needs to make money. And so you need to figure out very quickly what kind of stories people like to read, what kind of stories sell papers, and which ones don't. And so because you're a business, you are led by money, and which is usually a good thing. It's the power of the free market. If you make a product and people like it, they'll buy it, and you get to make more of it, and you get to make money at the same time. If you make a product people don't like, they don't buy it, and you got a business and got to start over. And it could be any number of reasons why. Sometimes it's bad marketing. Sometimes it's, some small flaw. Somebody else comes out with something just as cool or of similar quality or what have you. There's not every idea fails because it's bad, but I would say probably a lot of them, that's the main reason. But that is, it's not like you have a ton of competition for the news. It's, if you look at what if you look at what one covers, you mostly see what they all do. There is an outlier or two that are covering something else, or have a different take on it. But it's not like you have like 20 media outlets competing, and you go, okay, well, this one actually got that story wrong, and I'm tired of having to read or see what do they call it, redactions, or we're sorry we screwed up, whatever. Like there's no quality control is my point. So it's like, and it's been around, it's called legacy media for a reason. It's been around for so long that people just default to it, even if it isn't the greatest quality, but they're still piping in the stuff that gets people to read. And I think that's a bummer, because where's the sweet spot? You like it to be like completely independent of government, of everything, and just reporting on what needs to be reported on. But if there is a financial incentive to report on certain stories in certain ways, it's like, well, how do you remain impartial when you're just telling people what it is that. But anyway, I am thankfully out of time, because I was sputtering and going down very, very quickly. I didn't know where this was going to go. I am a little bit foggy of brain right now. I don't know why. I did get a good night's sleep, but yeah, for some reason, I don't feel like I've woken up just yet. Maybe I should give myself a little time to wake up before I do this. I literally roll out of bed, I throw on my robe, and I stumble in here, turn the computer on, and we just go. So maybe in the future, I'll give myself like a half hour to wake up, acclimate my brain, and then give you something. But let's face it, aside from, I see a few of you, 4 people, I think, on Rumble watch this. Otherwise, not so much. But that's a great thing. I don't have an audience that is depending or relying on some amazing video, so I don't feel too terrible. But anyway, to those who do watch, the few of you out there, thank you so much for watching. It is going to get better as I figure things out. But anyway, I got to go because my time is up. Take care, and I'll see you next time.